Hello YouTube, this is Asatsu 5. Let me adjust that a little bit. I'm feeling a lot better. I didn't feel bad, but honestly, COVID has been a cakewalk other than the physical isolation, but I have been talking to a lot of people. Um, more than normal. Um, Sometimes I'll get comments on YouTube, Instagram, what have you, and it's like, hey, good job, or hey, you know, cool video. But it's not really a conversation. I'm not really talking to you. There's no real exchange. But I've been having a lot of exchanges here lately because of COVID and different videos that I put out, and talking to close friends about COVID and health issues, and just checking on people that I care about. And in my last video, I talked about bad arguments about the dachshunds wearing face masks, and that the owners must vote for Biden, even though they're in Canada, though the Canadian citizens don't have a dual citizenship. And then this person went in a 180 and started complaining about a whole list of things that didn't have anything to do with the original post. And I broke down those arguments and how they're bad. And there was a class I took in college called Student Success. And it's a class that has no credits, but every college student in Texas has to take it. And they cover different subject matter as far as how to study, organization, and of course, because college is a melting pot of different ideals, races, and stuff like that. They teach critical thinking. Critical thinking is the main subject matter in junior college. One of the movies we watched was Crash. And the whole movie was based on stereotypes and assuming and not thinking things all the way through rationally. So I kind of reflected on that class when doing that Canadians are voting for Biden video. Also, I tend to like to argue. Now, I don't like to argue in defense. I don't like this F you, you're stupid, back and forth name calling type of thing. I don't like that, and I don't like having 3 or 5 people versus me alone, especially when I'm trying to have a conversation with a individual. So I don't like that, but I do like sharpening my skills at arguing in a more or less friendly environment. It's never completely friendly. There's always a goal of winning and not losing and proving your point. But being dyslexic, dysgraphic, and ADHD, I had a lot of crappy teachers, and I had to defend myself occasionally, not physically, but intellectually, to prove that I wasn't what they were trying to portray me to be. So arguing, although I'm not an expert at it, it's something I had to do at a relatively young age because I had crappy teachers. I prided myself on my ability to articulate myself. I'm not good at it, but I pride myself on, being a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not articulating myself that well. Basically, being a bigger threat and bigger challenge than my speech may imply. Also, with arguments, it's not always a back and forth. Maybe I'll have a certain view, and I'll listen to someone else who has a different view, and they give their argument. So they're giving their defense, they're giving their opinion, but we're not necessarily going back and forth. And through that exchange, I learned to sharpen my own skills and strengthen my own arguments. And the classic example of this is I don't believe in evolution. I believe that animals can adapt, but I don't believe in Darwinism. And there is the argument from lay people who have my mindset, where if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? It's a terrible argument. And there's this guy named Scullygram. He does mostly sword reviews, HEMA, history. He's an atheist, and I quite enjoy listening to him. But he was tackling this terrible argument where if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? And he goes, well, you're here, why are your parents still here? And it just clicked. It's like, I got to sharpen my argument skills against Darwinism. This argument that I've heard my whole life doesn't work. And we're not going to talk about that at the moment. But there are legitimate reasons to argue. And it doesn't have to be hate-filled. It doesn't have to be a fist fight. It can be academic, and it can be mutually growthful for both parties. And I really wish in high school we had a debate team. I think I would have enjoyed that. Because it's not a fight. You know, you're not defending yourself, your personality, your character necessarily. You're defending ideals, and you're picking apart different ideals. So that's another big difference. I don't like arguing to attack people. In most instances, I like to attack ideals. So that's why I don't like the name calling and the really defensive arguing. But I recently got in a other argument. Caruso the celebrity dachshund, that wasn't a real argument. I gave my argument, someone responded to me, but they didn't respond back. It wasn't a real back and forth. Not an even number of back and forths and stuff. They gave up, which that's not a victory on my part. They just didn't want to talk. And I can't work right now, so I'm really enjoying talking to people. But I was talking to someone else, and I've covered this subject matter in past videos, but I think I've better articulated my point on this subject matter. Now, the subject matter, this is an argument that I think is fundamentally flawed, and I generally laugh at this argument. And I want to give you my opinion, and if you can poke holes in it, I would like to hear. If you agree with it, I'd like to hear. I'd like to know your opinion. But this is over the oranges and apples appeal. There will be someone comparing something, and they'll say, you can't compare that. That's not comparing apples and oranges. Now, the fact that you say that's not comparing apples and oranges, you are at that moment comparing apples and oranges. You're doing a thing that you say that the other person can't do, which I find a problem with that. This is something I posted on my Instagram. It's not very popular. Posted on Facebook, not very popular. No one's hating on it. They're just not reacting to it. And I'd really like to see if my point of view is, I don't want to say valid, but if it's rock solid, if it's a coherent thought. Because the person that I shared it with doesn't think it's coherent on YouTube in this last argument, and I think it is. And they didn't argue why this was incoherent. They just said, "Oh, you're impossible to reason with," and they left. But this is the apples and oranges argument as I see it, and I want to hear your opinion. And this is my post. A lesson in poor argumentation never applied to apples and oranges to imply something is a bad comparison, or is unrelated or irrelevant. The fact that you're comparing two fruits, apples and oranges, makes to make a relevant point can be used to refute you. Also, if the government statistics can be compared can compare injuries caused by guns, cars, coconuts, and sharks, and be done and can be coherent statement for the sake of evaluating safety, I think comparing the health benefits of an apple and an orange, sometimes referred to as a gold apple in antiquity, that's debated on, can be just as relevant. That's my argument. So that last little bit that I said is debated. The orange, the fruit, predates the word orange as a color. And it seems that, in the East, that oranges and orange the color, they called the color orange because of the orange the fruit. And this is in different languages, not English. But, in Persian, Arabic, Spanish, it's just like English. The same word for the fruit is the same word for the color. Now, when the orange was moving to Europe, this is a free little history lesson. I'm not the end of our expert, but I have watched the history of the orange. Before the fruit came along, they just called orange a yellowish red, and when the fruit came to Greece, there was a little bit of evidence saying that they called them golden apples. They're the shape of an apple, they're a fruit, you can eat it, so they called them golden apples. Not 100% fact decided on, approved, but it has been asserted that, like when Hercules was trying to get a golden apple, he was really referring to an orange. So that's why I said, it's debated on. But it is interesting that the common usage of you're comparing oranges and apples, there's a good possibility that oranges were golden apples back in antiquity. So, again, the fact that you say you can't compare something by offering a comparison of those things you say you can't compare, to me is contradictory. The fact that we can compare things that are completely different species, some of them are inanimate, not living, and some of them are adamant, they are living, and we can compare them to get a common consensus if they were dangerous or not. I find this apples and oranges to be a poor argument. And I love the fact that I have glasses now because it makes me look more intelligent. Maybe, I don't know. It might make me look old, it might make me look creepy. But I think they're appropriate for this video. So that's my argument, that the apples and oranges is a poor argument and it is fundamentally flawed. The first time I covered this subject matter, was people were arguing that I could not compare tomahawks and axes. I did a hatchet cut test and a tomahawk cut test, and they were saying you can't compare the two, they're completely different. Even though tomahawks originally had, tomahawks as we know them originally didn't have the basin eye, they had a traditional axe head eye. I don't know what it's called, but they had wedges. It was the Basque axe in the Basque region of France and Spain that had that pass-through eye, and that got transferred over to tomahawks in America, but other tomahawks in America had wedges. And not only that, tomahawks are not strictly bladed weapons. They're clubs. They're striking weapons. So, in a sense, not all tomahawks are axes, but not all axes are but most axes can be tomahawks. And also, you got the Francisca, which is used. It has a similar function as a tomahawk. It's a one-handed battle axe that was thrown and used in melee as well by the Franks of France. And also I think it was used by the Norse. I think it was a dynamic weapon. So these people saying you can't compare axes and tomahawks, it's like, well, first we got to define what an axe is, and Tomahawks had wedges at one point, and axes did not have wedges at some point. So that they're not they're similar in that respect. Also, if we're talking about the traditional, Patriot tomahawk, it is an axe, it's a hand axe, and so it's a genre of hand axe, but it is an axe. So people got very upset with me for comparing the two, and they said that's apples and oranges. And I made a video series talking about how that was incoherent in my opinion. If you can compare drunk driving to knife attacks and the deaths that they cause, and we can decide which one is statistically more likely to kill you, or more likely to kill you, I think we can compare something as similar as axes and tomahawks. Obviously, we can compare a loofah and a sponge, even though a loofah is a plant and a sponge is an aquatic animal. I'm not a zoologist, but I did look it up. Loofahs grow in the jungle, sponges live in the ocean. I don't know if there's any freshwater sponges. So we can compare those. We can compare a sponge and the sun. Believe it or not, there's more contrast than comparing, but they're both yellow in general. So that's why I say the apples and oranges argument is fundamentally flawed. I want to hear your opinion. Thank you.